I'm James Bruce, you're watching Tabletop Dungeon, and this is Reichbusters, a 1 to 4 player cooperative miniatures Weird World War II game from Mythic Games. Now you could probably call it Wolfenstein the game if you wanted. Wait, no, apparently you can't call it that, that's already a thing. Okay, remember Commandos, the PC game? Absolute classic. If that was a board game, this would be it. Commandos, the board... What? Apparently you can't call it that. Okay, then Reichbusters it is, I guess. Okay, so maybe not as original as I had thought. However, in Reichbusters, you'll lead a crack team of Allied personnel into the heart of Germany, where you'll infiltrate the Nazi base and attempt to figure out what their secret weapon is and possibly fight it. You'll need to do this by being as quiet as possible until eventually the alarm goes off and you can paint the town claret on your way out. Now, normally I would do like a how-to rules overview just before I give you my thoughts on the game. However, having played 8 or so games, gone halfway through the campaign, played a raid mission, watched a number of playthroughs online from other people that are at least an hour long each, read through the manual and the errata 3 times, I still really don't think I'm playing correctly, and I don't think anyone else is either. But you know what? I'm loving it anyway. So without further ado, let's get on with my review. As ever, for the purposes of this review, to show you what it would be like at retail, I've only used the characters and the enemies from the core box set. I haven't opened up the expansions or any of the added extras from the Kickstarter. However, for the purposes of aesthetics for this video only, I have used the plastic door set, as well as plastic dog tags, which I think came with the expansion, and the plastic round tracker. They're really just for aesthetics' sake. They don't add anything or adjust the gameplay, of course, but they look better on video. So aesthetically, Reichbusters nails it on every level. The miniatures are 32mm heroic scale, I think the same as Games Workshop, roughly. They're very detailed, they're a little bit bigger than, say, Simon Zombicide series is, but the miniatures are incredible. On the downside, there's only one sculpt for each enemy type, but then there are a lot of enemy types, so that kind of makes up for it. They have great detailing, even the bases are pre-textured, so good for painting. The room tiles, the cards, everything is classic Nazi, which really helps to immerse yourself in the game world. Although characters share the same basic move and attack actions with their various weapons, most of the game really revolves around their set of action cards, which are unique to every character, of which there are 5 in the basic retail set. There are also purchasable skills, of which there is only 1 each of each skill. And although this can be a little tricky to remember what each skill does, it really helps to differentiate the characters as you continue on in the campaign. The amount of setup required for each game is nearly on a par with Gloomhaven. In 32mm heroic scale, the room tiles are suitably massive, and once you've laid out a mission, it can be pretty sprawling. Not a problem by any means if you have the space for it. This is a 6 by 4 foot gaming table, I think, and to be honest, with everything laid out, it's quite a tight fit. It's also not a game that I would be comfortable taking anywhere. It takes a good 30 minutes to an hour to set up, even 30 minutes if you're just switching between missions. The end result is well worth it, mind. It is a feast for the eyes, and anyone who loves to immerse themselves visually and thematically in the games they play will absolutely love this. The noise system, however, is a bloody mess. And although the game needed a noise and alert system, I don't think it was this one. Anything that you do requires you to roll 1 or more noise dice, that's these white ones. And if anything at all appears on the dice, then you need to draw a separate noise card. Now the top of the noise card will typically instruct you to re-roll 1 or more of the dice that you just rolled, and then compare the total result to this number in the middle, which may then result in some patrols being generated somewhere on the map. Thanks to the exploding dice concept, however, these rolls tend to be entirely swingy. Rolling a star counts as a 2 noise, however you then have to roll another dice and keep going if you keep getting stars. It's pretty random, it's inconsistent, and the drawing of the cards is frankly quite tedious. It's just awkward. I mean, thematically, it sort of works. I get the exploding dice concept. Perhaps opening a door seems like a pretty quiet and easy-ish thing to do, but maybe it hasn't been oiled in a decade and suddenly you've alerted the entire base to your presence. Or have you? Doesn't that door squeak like that all the time? Surely they're used to that by now. Yeah. So for that one action to then summon 3 patrols down the end of the corridor does seem a little bit far-fetched. Or maybe the fact that picking up a box of ammo might result in a roll of 10, whilst literally shooting your machine gun may result in a 0 or 3. I mean, even if you sat there and used the box as a drum, it still doesn't seem to compare. Now, in fairness, the manual does explain that the noise rolls are not the equivalent of a decibel level. It's not an actual noise level. It's more an indication of how much that noise was noted. But still, it just seems a bit silly. Some kind of streamlining for the noise system seems necessary here, but I don't know what. On top of that, you then have this alert system for enemy patrols and units, which is entirely unrelated to the noise system. Basically, they have 3 different levels of alertness, the lowest being nothing, and then you have suspicious and then alert, and it's only on this final stage that the enemy patrols will actually act and do anything. You use little blip counters to indicate patrols that haven't yet discovered you, and those don't do anything. They simply sit there on the map and don't move around. Now also, as soon as you enter the line of sight of an enemy unit, their suspicion, their alertness level will increase. So typically they will become suspicious. However, they still don't actually act until they've had another turn of looking at you, which can result in some pretty far-fetched gameplay situations. For instance, you can walk into a room, slaughter half the units, and they still won't act. They'll take an entire turn before they look at you and think, that looks a bit dodgy. Perhaps we should do something. Now, okay, thematically, you could sort of excuse this as a surprise attack round. And I do really like the mechanic of having blips to represent unknown enemy patrols. It's kind of like Genestealer Colt or Space Hulk. But the fact that those blips don't actually move seems a bit weird. Would it have added that much overhead to make the blips move around the map and actually patrol? I don't know. But I presume this is something that the game designers ran through and decided wasn't worth it. But if you weren't confused enough yet, there's also the base alarm level, which also acts as a round tracker. And if this reaches the end of the tracker, then you lose the game. And it's this round tracker that really pushes the game forward, since if you leave an enemy alive in its alert state and it has a turn where it can see you, it will hit its imaginary alarm button and raise the alarm level of the entire game, thereby losing you a turn in which to complete the game. Now, in the very first mission of the game, you only have the pre-alarm state. If you go past that and the base becomes alarmed, then you lose the mission. But in most missions, you'll have both a pre- and post-alarm stage. In the pre-alarm stage, you're sneaking around and trying to kill everyone before they notice you. Then in the post-alarm stage, you can start killing everything with wild abandon. At this stage, the round tracker can no longer be pushed just by enemies noticing you because everyone notices you. However, it does still continue to move on at the end of each round, and if you haven't completed the game by the time it reaches the end, you automatically lose. So this is really what makes the game so tense and keeps pushing you forward. To borrow a D&D term, there's never a point where you will be able to take a short rest and heal up. You'll be forever forced to keep on killing those enemies, keep pushing through the base, and keep going towards the goal. Now, although these 3 simultaneous alarm and alert and noise systems are a little bit messy, I think they basically work overall. It's just that they could do with a little bit of refinement. The exploding dice mechanic continues through the attack and the defense dice and the Vril dice. Did I mention there are 4 custom sets of dice in this game? Yeah. When you're attacking, any exploding dice that you get must either be used in the standard exploding way, so it counts as 2 and you roll another dice, or you can use that special to do some kind of special ability that you have, such as a burst mode on a machine gun that enables it to hit multiple enemies. Again, it feels a bit overly complicated for what should be a fairly basic mechanic that we're sort of all used to. The Vril dice are even more annoying because they have one particular face which will actually damage you, like the Vril chemical gets into your head or something like that. And that can be countered with a star. Now, I'm still not 100% sure how this works because we have yet to come across the one single room card that lets you upgrade your weapons to their Vril enhanced side. So I've never rolled these red dice yet. Playing through this 6-mission campaign, there is a small amount of progression in between missions. You keep all of your permanent wounds if you were wounded in the last mission, but you also keep the items you picked up, and any heroic points that you gained can be spent on buying new skills. You gain heroic points if you manage to kill 4 or more enemies on a single turn in a single room, which is surprisingly easier than it sounds. Heroic points can then be spent either at the end of the game, they can be saved up and spent on skill points, or you can use them to guarantee a success on a roll. So any items that you pick up also go into a communal pool, which is then redistributed however you like at the start of the next mission. However, picking up items can generally be more trouble than it's worth, and using them isn't particularly beneficial. One of the changes made in the FAQ update was that any enemy units that drop items would now drop them face up. Before that change, they would drop face down, so you didn't even know what they dropped, and you would then have to do a 2-dice noise roll just to flip them over and see what they even were. Thankfully, that's been changed, but for any items that start on the map, they still start as face down, and you do need to make a noise roll just to turn them over and see what they are. After that, it takes one basic action just to pick up an item, and then using it is free. For us, this means that we've never actually bothered to investigate items that are turned face down. It's just not worth the risk most of the time. There's also these special room cards which get placed on certain rooms, and you don't know what they are until you enter the room and turn them over. But they're not always a good thing, which again makes them a little bit pointless because most of the time you just won't bother to check. Using a grenade to clear a room out of enemies is obviously quite a noisy action, so this is really only something you would do post-alarm. However, even then, once you've cleared the room, the noise from the grenade will generate perhaps 3 or 4 more patrols from the barracks at different points on the map, leaving you a little bit worse off than you were before, only hopefully a little bit closer to the goal. In the end, it leaves you fighting your way out of an impossible situation while you get overwhelmed from another angle. And I think I kind of like that. It does end up pushing you towards the goal. You're never really going to clear a whole map of enemies. That's just not going to happen. But some people might call that being railroaded. Sadly, Reichbusters is also just mired with printing errors and unclear rules. When I first heard about printing errors in the manual, I didn't think that much to it, but reading through the errata, it's like a comedy of errors. 19B should be 24B, 20B should be 23B, 17B appears twice, this should be 6B, 17A appears twice, this should be 12A, though the art is correct, 16A should be 6A, 21A should be 24. I mean, come on. Could someone spend literally 10 minutes proofreading this stuff? Now, yes, you can play and ignore the room numbers entirely. It is possible to just look at the artwork on the tiles and match it up this way. But it does seem to be indicative of some larger errors, perhaps the lack of playtesting, proofreading, and just checking things over. It seems like something even the smallest bit of quality control would have caught. Now, in fairness, Mythic Games has said that they will reprint at their own cost a corrected version of the manual with updated rules, but when this will actually happen is still anyone's guess. Even after 7 or 8 playthroughs, we still find ourselves referring to the manual a lot, particularly when it comes to the skill keywords, which, as I mentioned, all the skills are unique, so it's pretty hard to remember what they all do. Now, one thing I would strongly suggest is printing out some of these reference cards, which you'll find on Board Game Geek. Sorry if I get the name wrong, produced by Antares Ranger. He made these. They are very useful, and they list what the character's starting skills are. So very cool to print those out and use as a little reference sheet. But even so, once you start purchasing more skills, of course, they won't be listed on there, so you may still have to look those up. But still, print that out for when you get started. It is an immensely useful thing to have. Finally, I do have one very minor complaint. In the box, other than a couple of trays for the miniatures, there's absolutely nothing in the way of storage. There are no baggies in there, there's no divider, there's absolutely nothing. So they pretty much expect you to just throw all the cards and all the bits together in one big box and then sort it out next game. That's not cool. Yeah, again, it's only a minor point. You can buy baggies on Amazon and sort it out yourself. But again, perhaps it's indicative of larger issues. So what is my verdict on the game? Well, I'll tell you that straight up, I love it, and I'm willing to forgive and overlook some of the messy rules for now. I think in time, either the fan community or Mythic Games themselves hopefully will provide an updated and streamlined rule set. As long as you're consistent with the way you play the game and your games are tense and enjoyable, which mine have been immensely so, then I don't think it matters that it's a little bit rough around the edges. As it stands, Reichbusters is both aesthetically pleasing, thematically fun, incredibly tense, and offers some really cinematic player turns, with every character behaving differently. And on the plus side, the disappointment that many of the Kickstarter backers will be feeling from their purchase of the game may mean that you can grab a bargain or two on eBay at the moment, but I'm pretty sure I'll be keeping my copy. All right, I hope this review has proved useful to you. As ever, I would really appreciate it if you could hit the like button. I know that sounds like a really silly thing to do, but it tells YouTube that you think this video should be ranked a bit higher, so that's always good for me. And if you would, consider subscribing for more board game reviews and the occasional terrain tutorials. Thanks for watching, and until next time, you've been watching Tabletop Dungeon.